Welcome to the LivBtr podcast. I'm Erica Spiegelman, addiction and wellness specialist and author, and along with me, I have my co-host, Siano, a New York-based serial entrepreneur, business scaling expert, and wellness aficionado. We are here to inspire, encourage growth, and most importantly, to live better. Today, we welcome on Jeff Brown. He's a former criminal lawyer and psychotherapist. Jeff is the author of 7 popular books: Soul Shaping, Ascending with Both Feet on the Ground, An Uncommon Bond, and a new one coming out soon called Humanifestations, along with another one that I love called Articulations. Jeff is a humanist. He's somebody that makes us think about what's important in life. And above all, he's a beautiful writer. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Pleasure to be with you.
Yes.
Delighted. Yeah.
We have the formal bio I always have read, and we will tell our audience all the things that you are. But can you just tell us a little bit about how you see yourself? Like what is it that you call yourself? Because you wear so many hats and you offer so much guidance and wisdom and I think tools for people. So tell us a little bit just how you would sum up yourself.
Wow. It's like writing, bios. It's always like the most ridiculous thing, especially for a Canadian, because we consider it so self-aggrandizing to say anything good about ourselves.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that I'm somebody who's primarily motivated by something I call sacred purpose. You can call it whatever you want to call it. I experience myself as like a car on a highway that just finds its way to the next exit sign that tells me what the next thing that's unfolding inside of me that demands expression or creative point of focus. And I just have grown to trust that process. That was so much of the work, was to trust that knowing in a world that's really determined to move us in a more survivalistic direction with respect to self-identification. And so it took a long time. I was in law. I was
you're a lawyer.
Yeah, and I was very close to becoming a very prominent trial lawyer in Canada. And then I just, I had sort of indicators of path throughout my life as a sort of a Jewish adolescent in a very pragmatic, feisty environment. I wasn't spiritually minded and I wasn't fantastical at all, but I would see this famous criminal lawyer in Canada named Eddie Greenspan on TV. And I used to say, I'm going to work with that guy one day. I know that guy. Like, I feel that guy. And then I had other visions. I was going to study humanistic psychology because I love Maslow's work when I was young. It sort of kept me going. And then that I was going to write at some point along the way. So I had these sort of images of encoded path, what James Hillman called the innate image. There's other words for it, entelechy, callings, whatever it is. And I just really believe that we come in with some gift or some offering or something that wants to be excavated and humanifest, to use my words. And that to the extent that we can do that, we experience a deep sense of gratification. It doesn't mean our path is easy. You may be called to an incredibly hard path, but you lose the confusion as to why you're here, which I think is where most people are stuck. Because we live in a world that doesn't encourage us to look inside to find the paths that are encoded within us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that.
So I'm a path guy. I'm really a path guy, and I really have faith in humanity with respect to encoded path.
So, but Jeff, for people that do struggle with, well, first of all, I have two questions really, but for people that, let's say, and you and I spoke about this, about like, I felt some intuition, very strong intuition when I was younger about certain things, or knowing about death when I was like very little without someone telling me about it, little things that we have, right? If you were raised in a family, and we had our own Mishnagas in our family, right? We had our own stuff going on with our parents and their narratives and the way they were raised and all this. But somebody that has been told you should do this, you have to do this by society, by being confined to their religion, to their sex, to their class, whatever that is, and feels extremely like maybe they're just a people pleaser, or maybe they have low self-esteem. How do we begin to like kind of break free and honor that authentic voice or that authentic path that, we are, I believe, are all called to? How does one do that? Or how do you recommend people get started?
Well, it depends where they're starting from. of course, and what you described as somebody who's starting at a place of not knowing at all who they
Mhm.
really are and why they're here, because they've been conditioned to believe all kinds of things. And I mean, I think since I believe most of humanity in terms of sacred purpose right now is really starting to unpack the awareness of our traumatic holdings, our unresolved emotional material that we've had to survivalistically put away in order to look forward and keep going and all those things. I think that the first thing to do, if you can do it, is to engage in some kind of psychotherapeutic, ideally somatic psychotherapeutic process so that you can excavate the material, come into contact with what's bunking you up, what's in the way, what's blocking your access to your clarity.
Yeah.
Because I think clearing emotional debris opens up space inside for who we really are to reveal itself. But I also think our capacity to hold the space for that material matures us in our capacity to hold the space for the finding of our real path in this world. I think there are a lot of benefits to doing that work. And
Yeah.
they also have to create what I call solitude, just solitude. Like, you have to develop the ability, especially if you grew up in a shtetl of characters with no boundaries, which so many of us did with any kind of ethnic background,
Yeah.
to be able to create a separate space for yourself to get to know who really lives within you. And we're up against it. I mean, so much of my work at the time was focused on understanding the way in which familial conditioning was interfering with my development of a more authentic consciousness. But now I'm understanding systemically how the power broker world is set up really to overwhelm, overstimulate us, exhaust us, keep us so distracted from who we really are that there's no experience of sovereignty. So now I am starting to understand it more in a sociological sense, what's going on here, that those power brokers are not our friends. And so there's a lot of unpacking to do.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of exploring to do. I wrote Soul Shaping, my first book, about my journey and talked about adventuring, and so some part of it is the internal work, the clarifying work, the releasing work, but part of it is going out and trying things on for size, different ways of being, even things that feel like the opposite of you, in order to get information from your experience as to why you're here. I was lucky for some odd, crazy reason that I will never understand. I was getting feedback from my experience at an early age as to what was living within me and my path of directionality. A lot of people don't have that for all kinds of reasons. So they have to really prioritize their fight for their right to the light, because if they don't, nobody's going to do it for them. That's
Love it. Fight for the right to the light. Yeah.
You said so much, and I'm trying to unpack all of it, and a few things came to mind. One thing that I've been kind of toying with recently is I think most people are looking to find themselves. And in my experience, I feel like I've created myself in a way.
Right.
And, I'm always envisioning where I think I should go in the future. And, similar to what you described, but I look at it a little differently, but you really shed light on, my journey for myself. And I guess, I'm curious if you think that there's seasons, it sounds like there's been different seasons and chapters to your life. And when you see something that's interesting and you might veer off course to explore that a little bit further, does everybody experience that? Or are some people so scared to veer off because they feel like they're, gonna not be successful, not be fulfilled, just living in
and not survive.
Not survive. Yeah, even more so.
I mean, I think we've been collectively unbraved. That's the term I use, and that we need to get rebraved, because I think we live with so much fear from individual and ancestral experience that just the idea of contemplating another path for many people is utterly terrifying. I think we really need to understand how deep the fear goes. But building on what you said, the way I always thought of it is, I think it's similar. It's the art of self-creation. I thought that I was a self-creativist. I was self-originating, which was easy for me because I never believed anything anybody told me, because I just knew they didn't know what they were talking about. And so if that's helpful, if you really understand that mostly nobody knows what they're talking about, and that you want to live a more sort of self-originating life. Rumi has this wonderful quote that I put in Soul Shaping. It was the opening quote, I think, which I think you'll love. It was, some people pick up their tools, others become the making itself. And I think that's what we're talking about. But of course, getting somebody to the point where they're ready to embrace a self-originating path is, again, back to Erica's original question, which is how. I mean, it's fine to have an insight into a way of being that might serve you, but how do we get there in a world that seems to be organized around keeping us generic and keeping us hemmed into a particular survivalistic function where we have just enough energy to be a good little consumer, but not so much energy that we become sovereign. Right? It's the game. That's the game right there. I believe that's the game right there. But in terms of, do I think that everybody gets indicators, like say intuitively, if we talk about intuition, I think that, depends on how connected they are to their intuitive knowing. But I think everybody hears things that say, listen, don't walk in that direction. Don't make that choice. Don't stay in that particular relationship. Don't open that door. But because of all of these other sort of drowning conditionings, often it's impossible to really listen to it. I listened to it. I really believed when I saw Eddie Greenspan on television that I was going to work with the guy. And I just wasn't fantastical. It was not my nature. And then I worked with the guy. So then you sort of get evidence from your experience that you're not so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you answered that question, because that was my next question. Did you?
No, I'm going to tell you something even crazier. Okay. One day, because that was sort of always my thing. I'm going to go and be a lawyer. I'm going to be a criminal lawyer. I'm going to be the next Eddie, and I'm going to be with Eddie. And Eddie and I did the giant murder trial. It was like a whole crazy thing. I'm just writing a book about me and Eddie because it was just so crazy. But one day I was in this place called Collingwood, Ontario, which is a place that, unless you're a skier, and Eddie Greenspan absolutely could barely even lift his own bags, was not skiing. But he was in courtrooms all over Canada because they were Ontario, because he was very famous. And I had been up all night. So I had, you're in that kind of more open space when you're, or something. I was going skiing with a buddy. And we were outside of this plaza. And I had this thought. I'm good at, Eddie Greenspan came into my consciousness. I'm going to see Eddie Greenspan. And, it wasn't like I was affixed to it. It was just a passing thought. So then I walk into this Verstinkene mall. And who's on the fucking payphone where he spent his life before there were cell phones, but Eddie fucking Greenspan. So I said, okay. So this is some kind of evidence that maybe there is a relationship between what we know to be true for ourselves directionally and something I started to call, in my more spiritually bypass phase, the Universal Broadcasting System, the UBS. We're having a constant conversation that's going on here. I'm not so sure I fully believe in that. Maybe I've become a bit cynical about it. But, I think you do get, if only the feeling when you walk in a direction, you feel peace with path. You're getting, even on that level, information. You're no longer confused. You're no longer berating yourself. You're no longer envying somebody else's path, because you feel good walking that path. And your body says, I call them truth chills. You get that feeling of this is true, as opposed to truth aches, when it's like your body saying, this is false. You're living a false path. And so, I mean, I think we're primed to tell ourselves when we're moving in the right direction and when we're not.
Absolutely. I just want to bring to a little bit of awareness, and that if people in the audience are dealing with things that are really getting in the way of their truth, their honoring themselves, like, let's say, drug and alcohol use, or any kind of disordered thinking, or something that is really getting in the way of their joy, of their happiness, of their purpose, of their clarity, because Jeff, the world I work in, and Jay too, he recently has, chose a healthier path and is more clear and understands how much that has, affected the way we see ourselves in the world, and, all of that. So I think, I just was in Las Vegas last week for a conference, and looking in the casino of these people downing drinks, gambling, being
at 9 a.m.
No, it's 7 a.m. I went down to breakfast at 7 a.m. and there are people there still going, and watching the big horse races. And it was just this moment of like, wow, like, how can you be clear with this distraction going on? And more people than not, I truly think, have some kind of distraction. I mean, maybe not to that degree, but there's a continuum of it, right? And so if people are listening to this and saying, well, like, that's hard for me to ever believe that I can do that, or, I just want us to speak to them of you can get the debris out of the way. There is help, there is hope, there is a way through there, right? Because just of how detrimental these habits are to us in terms of us honoring our path and living our fullest life and optimizing our life, like Jay and I say,
Yeah. Well, it is important to say
with football, with addiction and gambling and shopping and eating and whatever it is.
I think you have to really, it's complicated. If you've never gotten any evidence that there can be a better way to live, you're riding on faith. And I'm not talking about faith in Jesus. I'm talking about faith in yourself. And, I think that it is always complicated to find a way to articulate or to articulate to somebody that it's worth their trouble. And I'm not living in their body, and I'm not living in their trauma, and I'm not living in their circumstances. But it is my absolute fervent belief that every one of us, to one extent or another, can make progress in this life with respect to coming closer to what we might call a sense of wholeness or deep gratification. I think we're all pioneers on this path. We have to be realistic. We're coming from a survivalist consciousness that defines who it is by what puts food on the table. That's how the entire consciousness has been organized. And if you're wanting to define your consciousness by who you really are and why you're really here, there's a lot of audacity in that. And you have to understand that, you may have to spend, and probably will and should spend, your entire life incrementally moving in the direction of finding that path. I think that's a beautiful and wonderful thing. We're pioneering a new way of being in this world that will save the species, if anything will. If everybody found their path and was gratified on the path of purpose, nobody'd be hurting anybody anymore. These are all frustrated, misplaced forms of aggression. That all this acting out is coming from people who are trapped in the unhealthy parts of the ego, not the healthily well-developed sense of self and all those things. And so, but, I think it is important to be realistic. There are great therapeutic tools, and they're more and more developing all the time. And I always tell people, interact with 3 or 4 therapists. Just don't take the first one that walks through the door, because there's a lot of bad ones. And, like with any profession, you have to be very careful about that. But it is happening now. There is more conversation. We're having this conversation. My booby never had this. My booby said to me one time when I was writing Soul Shaping, she said, she was all 94 pounds.
She was alive. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And she said, I did. Oh, my grandparents saved me anyways. But she said, you're doing the work that I couldn't do. You're doing the work that I couldn't do. So she had an awareness of that. My grandfather was a whole other thing, as he was spending a lot of time, God bless him, at the racetrack, which was he had absolutely no interest. He was in a survivalist consciousness. He was adapting his personality to surviving as a salesman in the world. He had no interest in these deeper considerations of how do you feel. It was how do you do? That's survivalism.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. But so I just think it's important to say, it's not the Americana hype model. It's not Tony Robbins. You're not going to get you may have crack open experiences or peak experiences, but in terms of real time change in the direction of wholeness, it's going to take you your whole lifetime, but it's worth it, and you're worth it. And then you decide if you're willing to brave the battle, because it's a battle.
Yeah. Beautifully said. There's no one I like to talk to more. I'm not joking. To have conversation, to have, hear the thoughts, the way you articulate.
Look at you, glorify me. The great Spiegelman is right before me here. Look what's happening. Come on.
It's the best. Jay, do you have a question? Because I have another.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, again, just back to like my experiences with removing alcohol and becoming more clear and actually starting to relearn, myself and get in touch with myself. I've found it to be so fulfilling, right? Like where I felt like I was numbing myself for so long because of past trauma and the loss of my mother and, all the things that, I think it's safe to say everybody has trauma, right? There's different levels of it.
100%.
And I think that the world we're living in right now, especially through COVID, I think there's a lot of really lonely, unhappy people that are stuck in the cycle like I was, where it's just, oh, this is terrible. I don't feel like dealing with this. I don't feel like, let me go decompress. Let me, and it's really easy to do. And it's, I think society, makes it really easy, and marketing and advertising, and, everywhere you go, it's like, have a drink. And now it's like everywhere you go, it smells like cannabis. It's like, you can't, it's tough to walk down the street with a clear head. And when Erica mentions, like, people that are in that casino and, participating in the gambling and the drinking at 9 a.m. and all that stuff, which was very much me. I mean, I lived in that world. And then it got to a place where I couldn't really, like, if I go to Vegas, I rent a car, I stay off the strip, I'm in the mountains, like, I have no time. I have no, like, I can't be involved in that energy, not because I feel like I have to drink by any means. I'm like through that, but it's just the energy is like, I can't take it. And I'm so grateful to be able to say that coming from 180 degrees of that reality. It's like, wow, I think anybody can really do it, but it might not be perceived as fun to them, right? Like, most people I know can't wait to get away from their wives and their kids and get to Vegas and have the first drink and do everything we just described. That's by far the majority of people.
Well, first of all, congratulations on your brave achievement.
Well, thank you. It's,
for as far as you've gone on the path and what you've had to unravel and deal with and confront, it's important to acknowledge how just extraordinary that is, because it's so much easier in many ways not to. And I think
beautiful.
And it is beautiful. You just got to stick around with it for a while. Like I think what helped me a lot is I had an ability to kind of get in sort of a bubble. So I had my kind of new agey music, which just let me know there was a softer way of being than my intensely activated shtetl home. And then I started to go to places like the Omega Institute in New York, which is eomega.org. I'm always happy to advertise for them. Esalen is a place people go, Kripalu, Brighton Bush in Oregon. And there you get exposed to, and so these are not like spiritual bypassing communities, which have their own perilous risks attached to them. These are more grounded, properly held spaces where, and I'm sure, Erica, you've probably been to at least one of these places.
I know Esalen well, growing up in San Francisco,
and you go to these places and you have everybody there is sort of eager to sort of unpack the nonsense and find their way to a truer, more authentic way of being. And if the space is held properly, which it usually is, because they use pretty good practitioners, you then get exposed to another way of being. And then you have something to compare your moment-to-moment habitual experience to. You start expanding your habitual range of emotion in the direction of a more authentic, self-connected way of being. And then you get supported in that, and maybe you make a few friends who are doing that, and then it starts slowly moving in the direction of your living that. So
normalizing that other people exist like this. You don't feel so alone. I mean, I remember in my life, I felt very alone. When someone could relate to me, that was like, I could cry about it, thinking about it. When I felt finally like someone saw me for the first time, or that I could relate to somebody, it's such a relief when you're in a dark place. It's such a beautiful thing. And I just wanted to ask Jeff too, you wear many hats. Jay wears many hats. I wear many hats. It's just thinking about this morning. And a lot of the hats I wear is filled with deep purpose. And then there's also the reality that I have bills, I have a family, I have things I want to do with my life, which does require money, and finances need to be part of the equation, right? And so I'm just curious, in your life, and you wear many hats, and obviously you too have a roof over your head. How do we come to terms with, pushing our lives in the directions of being financially successful, and also being, I know you're going to possibly say, if we have our purpose, and maybe the money will come, but I'm just saying, okay.
I may not say that actually.
Okay, yes. Fine. So how do we negotiate that, is my question to you, from somebody that has maybe had these thoughts around this.
Well, I mean, I wrote Grounded Spirituality for a reason, because for me, with my history, if I'm not at least making enough just to survive or getting
Mm.
some way of getting support to survive,
Yeah.
I couldn't create. I couldn't
Right.
flourish. I was just agitated all the time. So I don't believe, I believed in my first quotes book was called Ascending with Both Feet on the Ground, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be able to function in the world and take care of the bottom line and have at least just enough so that you can then explore and develop other pathways. I don't think that if you follow your bliss, the money will necessarily come. Some people will be engaged creatively or spiritually by something that doesn't pay the bills. And so they deliver mail. One of my dream jobs is delivering the mail, because as a writer, I get most of my ideas when I'm moving my body. And I think if it's just enough money to live on. And so for me, because I am really adhered to my creative voice and the development of that voice, I've rejected many opportunities in this field that would have been far more economically lucrative. Because for me, it's like, if I have just enough to cover and, have a home and all those things, I'm happy to give up on the quest for great materialism, because I know creatively what price I'm going to pay for that. I don't want to pay the price. So, and I don't see that as, I know a great many incredibly wealthy people who are mostly, for the most part, utterly miserable and worried about money all the time, more than everybody else, and who almost never seem to find their great path. I mean, it seems to come somehow in the friction of the school of hard knocks. But I think if you're questing for an authentic path in a survivalistic world, you may have to accept that you will never be that wealthy person, but you're the richest guy on the street.
I love it.
I really believe that. I really believe that. Yeah.
No, and I'm happy to hear that, because I think a lot of people struggle with those thoughts and those worries, and and it's something that is a real issue. Like I hear it from, I think a lot of moms and women these days that at least I speak to too, like, it has changed for women. Women are mothers, women are working, women are this, women are that, right? And it's like, but it is a great job to be a parent, and it is a great job just to have one job. You don't need to do everything. I feel called to do many things, but I just, I just feel like it's something to address that, I think people are just, they have too much on their plate. They're overworked, they're overstimulated, they're just going, when there's a real beauty in resting. There's a real beauty in taking time off, and and it's really hard, I think, with the narrative that I hear all the time in certain communities, that you just have to keep going, and it's everyone's just busy, and busy doesn't necessarily mean successful. So I just wanted
I posted this morning on my Instagram a quote that I think is interesting to insert here. Many people forget the goal isn't money. The goal is to spend your days as you wish.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that money is a tool to be able to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. But of course, it depends on what you wish.
Right, completely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that, there's a lot of people that are stuck in that 9 to 5 routine, because they're able to live at a certain, level as a result of it, even though they're miserable. And there's a lot of that too. And I think that's where drugs and alcohol really lend a hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sort of set up this idea that you're going to, play the game and suffer through the game and do whatever you have to do to get through the game.
Right.
And then you reach a certain age, and theoretically you're
like,
then
F the game.
Then you're going to fuck the game, and you get to do what you really want. The problem is there ain't a lot left of them by the time that happens.
Yeah.
They often have no idea what they want to do or who they really are. So, I mean, listen, we're living in a landscape that benefits, the power broking system benefits from us not really knowing who we are. And being persistently concerned about money. So we constantly engage in the marketplace, make more money so we have more money to be consumers. This is the whole setup is like this. This is why
it's a trap.
Of course it is. It's a horrifying.
We've all fallen in it. At least Jay and I have.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody, almost everybody's fallen in it. It's a really, really powerful game. This game. Yeah. And until we figure out a way to build our economies around true path, where people are making their livings from doing what they love, not just that which puts food on the table. So you have to put food on the table, but now we're trying to build something in where you're doing that somehow and still occupying your authentic self in your day-to-day life. This is the step that we're trying to take. But in this world that has so much vested interest around keeping us in the materialistic structure, I just think we need to get really realistic. And I'm working on a book about this, about just how powerful that system is and how much energy and bravery and social support it requires to try to structure your life around this other way of functioning and being in the world. It's an extraordinarily hard thing to do. I had a lot of energy, so I could do it. If you don't have a lot of energy, it becomes a lot more complicated to try to do it.
We need to elect you as an official somewhere and get you, passing law. I mean, you know what I'm saying? But it's
free sushi for all. Continue.
Socialism.
That's my only platform. Jay, you good with that?
I'm very good with that.
You got to bring those glasses, though.
I know. Anyway, I won't get into socialism and the fact that, mailmen get paid the same as a teacher, as the same as a doctor in, certain Nordic countries, but it exists to some degree, some places, a little bit. There's a little bit more.
Some would argue it's happening in Canada, and I believe that something far worse is trying to take root in Canada. The whole World Economic Forum Great Reset economy is trying to get established here. I don't believe that's going to serve us. I understand that we want everybody to at least be able to survive, and so I would say progressive conservatism might work with that rather than old style extreme right-wing stuff. But I think that the more you move towards a globalistic or communistic or extremely socialistic world, you move away from individuation. There's nothing they want less than freedom of expression and individuation. And I don't think you're going to gratify humanity if they're not individuating and finding their own unique true path in this world. I just don't think that works.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts around the concept of manifestation.
Right. So my new book is called Humanifestations. So that should be the answer to your question.
But
I mean,
what a segue.
I was going to ask you the next question about humanifestation.
I owe you $5 for the way you said that. Well, I mean, I'm not a law of attraction kind of guy. I'm just a hard worker. So I believe that I could humanifest what I wanted to humanifest if I worked for it. I don't ask the universe. I don't really trust that the universe is going to do me any favors. I'm going to do them for myself. And that there were times when I did feel like there was an interplay, like when I made a determined effort to try to bring something into being in the world, that things started to happen and come in my direction. But sometimes bad things started to pay attention to me. I mean, synchronicity is not a hard thing to figure out. It's just whether it's a good or bad thing is the hard thing to figure out. I mean, so I just, because I believe in self-originating, I just rely primarily on my own two hands. And so I believe humans are extraordinarily capable of creating brilliant realities far removed from where they came from if they're willing to work for it. And that's as much as I understand about.
Yeah, I was curious using the well, you described it, I think, very similarly to how I feel. And because I think that no matter what it is that you want, and if it's going to work with a prominent lawyer, right? And you could say that you want to do that. And if you put the right action behind it, of course it could be your reality, right? Like I think, but without the massive action, I don't believe that you could just sit around waiting for the universe to deliver.
No. Yeah.
I know a lot of trustafarians, trust fundian people who, just sit around, because they're fucking lazy and do drugs all day long and ask the universe for all kinds of things and nothing happens because they don't want to work for it. I get into arguments with them all the time. Just fucking go to work. Like, it's like too complicated.
Tell us about Humanifestations quick. Just tell us like, a bit about what this offering is about.
Well, this is my 8th book, my 5th quotes book. So I write these little quotes that some people like in the world.
Love. I love.
Thank you. My fellow shtetl dweller. So this is my 5th of those books. It's called Humanifestations on Trauma, Truth, and Transformation. And it's, I like it. It's like a brother book to my last one called Hearticulations. Here, I'll just read you a cool little one, which is on page 1.
Okay.
which is kind of relates to what we're talking about. There are two forms of courage in the world. One demands that we jump into action with our armor on. So that's survivalism. The other demands that we strip ourselves bare naked and surrender. Bravery is a curious thing. And I think it is.
Yeah.
What's brave sometimes? It's getting fucking vulnerable and figuring out what's coming up inside of you. Get naked, Erica, exactly. Or it's, armoring up and jumping into the fray and the madness of the world, which, it's like Jay and I know all about, and punching your way through to a better reality. And the art form is this dance between surrender and willfulness. This is the work. As you stay on the path for longer, you learn when it's time to take action and when it's time to surrender and go in. And it's all active. It's still active, but it's a different form of action. Yeah.
Outside of your books, where can our community find these quotes that you're referring to?
Yeah. So
everything.
Yeah. So my main website is jeffbrown.co, because I'm a co-creational kind of guy. I teach, and there's a bunch of audio download courses, a man mood, narcissistic mood writing course, all kinds of stuff there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, of course, and I'm on Substack now, and I'm just slowly building an Enrealment newsletter there. I have a Enrealment Hour podcast that I do every week or two. And I have a school called Soul Shaping Institute where I teach some courses where I'm more interactive. My Writing Your Way Home course is there. My wife Susan's poetry healing course is there coming up in June. And all kinds of other things in the works.
Yeah.
Exciting. What is your Instagram? Because I looked for it. And
Jeff Brown Soul Shaping, which I may change. Jeff Brown Soul Shaping.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of Jeff Browns, but no, there is no Jeff Brown like you.
There is no Erica Spiegelman like you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Definitely not me. We love you. I'm just going to say it, and appreciate you and feel honored you spent the time with us and with our community, sharing some wisdom, sharing some of your thoughts and how you can, articulate the things that I always feel to be true. And it's very, I think it's very rare to find somebody that can express, right, Jay, these things like we heard today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to.
I don't know. At least I've always felt, I've felt them, and yet never heard somebody articulate them so well. So that's it. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
I feel the same way, and I can completely understand why you speak so highly of Jeff. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Erica. And thank you, Jay. We could all just have an amazing sushi dinner in New York one day.
Anytime.
That's way easier for me, and I'm in.
Yeah, and I'm coming, so that's it.
Let's do it.
That's the date. All right. Well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I feel like we could do this for the next 3 hours.